Good morning. My name is Paula DeWitowitz. I'm the PhD Education Research Coordinator for the School of Education and Professional Licensure at Walden University. And today I want to present Writing Synthesis. This is a companion in some ways to the Chapter 2 presentation, Escaping the Black Coal of Calcutta Unscathed, that I have in a separate recording because it augments the resources that are provided there to help students focus on best procedures and best practices related to the development of their literature reviews for their dissertations. It can also be useful to others as they evolve research processes using the existing literature. But in essence, it's here to assist with the dissertation process. So let's go ahead and get started. There are several things that are going to occur in this presentation. I'm going to discuss the idea of planning tools, of quality of evidence, the usefulness of annotation and different forms you can use for that, the need for saturation, synthesis and integration, and including how each section relates. Those are going to be covered briefly, and then I'm going to present tables that you can use as tools in order to develop your dissertation document, your literature review in particular. So that said, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that I recommend for students in organizing their literature as they prepare to actually conduct their literature review, to go out and dig into the many articles and many journals that they will dig into in the process of preparing to put together their literature review, is a concept map. And the reason is because this helps you really create a focused process to do a thorough literature review without having pieces dropped, realizing later that there are other things that you need to cover that you didn't, and not being sure what you have and have not accomplished. So I've provided a couple of examples of concept maps inside this presentation. The reason I included these in particular is because they have different ideas included within them. So for example, here the concept map, where it says a concept map, you would put your phenomenon itself, whatever you're going to research. And you'll notice must have, arranged with concepts and ideas relevant. What you're going to do is, based on your central phenomenon, consider the different topics that you need to cover. And those will be the main points that you put into these boxes. Now, this first tier of boxes can be as many or as few as you believe you need based on your topic to do a really thorough examination of your topic. Okay? From that, you'll create subtopics and you'll research those and you'll expand out as far as you need to in order to really do a good search. So let's say, for example, you put up in here presidential election. And I use this example in my Chapter 2 PowerPoint, so please forgive me if you've already seen that one. But here you might have, as your first box, political affiliation. Under that, you might have subsections: Democrat, Republican, Independent, Libertarian, whatever else. Okay, Green Party, those kinds of sub-boxes. All things that you might want to look at as you consider who you want to elect for president. Your second box might be political voting record. And you might have things down here, subtopics like the economy, the NRA, a hot topic right now, education, any of those kinds of areas that are important for you to consider. Then over here you might have something else, interest groups or something like that. I mean, each of these would have a different thing that you consider to be important. Under that, you would have subsections to identify what you want to research in relation to that. So what you'll do is create a good concept map to give you an idea of what you need to cover. Again, another example here, and I enjoy these because they have ideas included. As I highlighted before for others, this is a messy, free-flowing kind of document, okay? But the idea is that they get you somewhere. So this is going to get you to a really good, well-produced, thorough literature review. But it's going to be something that you do over a period of time. So it's going to expand and contract and evolve as you conduct your literature review itself. Something else that's going to be important to just review quickly is the nature of the quality of evidence. I'm going to briefly cover it here, although again, it is covered in the Chapter 2 discussion, but since these two fit together so closely, it's really something that's important to consider again. First of all, gold level articles, and these are just an arbitrary assignment that I've given to them, but it gives you an idea of their relative merit. Articles reporting research from peer-reviewed journals. Peer-reviewed in that no one knows who the authors are, so the review can be based solely on the quality of the research presented and the presentation itself. So this gives you a way to both review what research was done, how well it was done, and the conclusions that were drawn. That is going to be your gold standard because that gives you a chance to analyze all aspects of the study and decide whether or not it's really quality to be included in your literature review. Silver level will be articles reporting perspectives. Those are going to be less valuable because you cannot review the research materials, the research that was done itself. You have to take the author's opinion as being valuable, and you won't be able to have a way to judge for yourself. Dissertations also fall in there, and peer-reviewed edited books. So those are less valuable. Those are not something that you want to use as your main type of data source in your literature review. Finally, bronze books, books by experts, books that really are tremendously distanced from actual research that's been conducted. Those are going to be less valuable and should be used very sparingly, if at all. Finally, copper levels. Those kinds of sources should not even be in a literature review. So as you're looking, make sure you realize that newspaper articles, opinion pieces, consumer pieces, policy information, that really all sets the social stage. So the social problem or educational problem, depending on your discipline, that's what you're going to include in your introduction in your Chapter 1, but it is not going to be included in your literature review itself. So that's the kind of thing that you want to consider as you're putting together your study. This is where we really get into the meat of the writing process, and we get into the meat here because this is where you actually start to take notes on what it is you're actually going to write, okay? So essentially, as you take notes on the articles that you read, you give yourself material that you can include then in the literature reviews as you create your actual document. Your annotation, if you choose to do it as an annotation, when you take notes for all of the articles that you read, will include notes on things like the educational or social problem that's underlying the issue, the research problem or the gap in the literature that the individual was looking at in the article that you read, the purpose that they identified, the framework they used, the methodology, the population and sample and participants, the data sources, analysis notes, and the conclusions. You're going to not just note what they say those things are, but also whether or not they're appropriate or what might have been better. Often people don't use data sources. They can't get the data sources that would be the best choices. So you have things to consider here. Now, at the bottom of this page, I give you a link for a series of Excel forms, literature review matrices, from which you can choose in order to create an annotation in a horizontal form rather than a vertical form with a series of paragraphs, which is what you'd have with this kind of annotation. Same topics can be covered, but they're covered horizontally and it's easier to compare them. And it's created in an Excel form so you can cut, copy, paste, move around as appropriate. So please go ahead and use this link down here if it will be of use to you. Briefly, I want to remind you of what saturation is. Saturation is the idea that you will read and put information into your literature review to cover all ideas that exist on your topic. Not every article, but all ideas that exist on your topic that are noteworthy, that are relevant to it and to your study, okay? The point of writing is really to create synthesis and integration, to take the annotations that you have and to turn them into a narrative about your topic, about what's known about it in the peer-reviewed literature, okay? So to do that, you're going to compare and contrast the contents of all of the articles in all of the different categories: population, setting, timing, methods, conclusions, all of that, so that you can either share information that agrees or explain why different information conclusions drawn disagree. So a synthesis is going to be pulling similar details together based on the conclusions that are drawn. Integration is going to be pulling different details together based on the conclusions that are drawn that disagree with each other. In synthesis, the conclusions will agree. In integration, they won't. Your goal with an integration is to reconcile the differences in conclusions, presenting a viable possible reason why they do not agree, so that you can explain how they fit together. If you can't, then you have the potential for a research gap, because we should be able to draw similar or the same kinds of conclusions or explain why they're different in different situations. So that's a synthesis versus an integration. Let me give you an example of a synthesis. It's a very simple one. Again, students learn best in classrooms where there's order, where there's quiet, where there's respect. Notice that none of these things disagree. So assuming that there are students from the same group or the same age group, class, subject, that kind of thing, we could put these together to create a different sentence or a different idea that shows how they fit together. Classrooms that are ordered, quiet, and respectful. And we put our citation afterward. So synthesis is pulling several things that are similar together to expand our knowledge by identifying that those pieces do give us a larger picture. Integration is taking things that disagree. Students learn well in classrooms, quiet classrooms, when they work together, when they interact with each other on projects, and when they give presentations, to try to explain why different situations, different results don't agree with each other. So for example, quiet classrooms do not align with working together, working with each other on projects, or giving presentations. In those kinds of cases, we go deeper. We don't look at just the conclusions, we go further to understand what might be different and explain why they got different conclusions. Social studies, working on projects, language arts, giving presentations. Those are two reasons why students in those studies that those researchers conducted might be different, because different settings, different topics might lend themselves to different venues of learning. So those are two things to consider. On the other hand, we still have a situation where study halls have conflicting ideas. One research study found that students learn well in quiet study halls, while others learn well when they're allowed to work together in study hall. Those two don't really agree with each other. There's no way to deconflict those. So here's what it might look like if it's written up. There is conflicting evidence regarding strong methods for students to learn in study halls, while including working quietly and working with others. Notice there's no way to reconcile those, so we just put out there how they don't agree, okay? Now you could say right after that, this appears to be a gap that is possible to research, okay? And that might be what you focus on, but it may not be. However, it would actually be a gap, so I just want to point that out to you. At the same time, we can write up the second piece where we can reconcile the differences to say, research indicates that students benefit from interacting with each other on projects in social studies classes and from giving presentations in English language arts classes. So here you have two things that are reconciled. You're also going to include in your literature review a clarification of why each section is important, why you covered that topic. Remember that a section will be one of those boxes on your concept map. Why is it important to your topic? Why did you cover it? And what it means to your study itself. Does it present the gap? Does it potentially explain what you might find in your data? Does it present a part of your framework, what does it mean? How does it fit? Okay. Now I want to get into the meat, and this is really where the value of this particular PowerPoint lies. So my point in presenting everything prior is so that you have a context to use when you're developing this. So this is an example of a literature review matrix. Now it's a partial matrix in that it doesn't have all the columns. It doesn't have the problem, the purpose, the framework all separate. Notice that I've kind of put key pieces in, the framework, the research questions, hypothesis, that kind of thing, simply for space, okay? So in a typical literature review matrix, each of those categories that you would have on the annotation section would be a header at the top of an Excel file matrix. So each of these would run across here. Now what I've put here instead in one place is an APA reference. Couple of things I want to share with you, just food for thought. Number one, and this was a hard-learned lesson for me, when I started to pack away all of the articles that I had used for my literature review after I had done them, and this was back in the day when most things were done in paper, I had made 6, 7 copies of some articles because I had forgotten that I had read the articles once before. So I started to read the article again, and ooh, this is great stuff, copy. Ooh, this is great stuff, copy. So I have a suggestion for you. Create a master reference list for yourself. Okay, one place where you list all the references that you look at. You don't necessarily have to use those references. In other words, if you look at an article and decide that it's not something that you need, you can put it on that reference list too. Just don't give it a number. So anything that you reference and you take notes on, give a number off to the side. But that way, you don't have to create or to reprint the reference in every single document you use, because as you do that, there's a possibility that you will corrupt it, even if you're copying and dropping, that you will only drop part of it or that it will somehow become corrupted. So master list of references that you've looked at and potentially that you're using with numbers next to them can help you to simplify things a lot. The second thing is that if you create a different matrix for every single one of those topics that you had on your concept map, or that you identify as something you should cover, then you can put like articles with like articles. That can make things easier for you when you actually go to do your analysis, because you don't have to go shuffling through numbers of pages or scrolling down masses of pages to really get at what you want to talk about. Thing about that, though, is that you're going to find that some articles fit on several matrices then, or several matrices. That's another reason that I have this APA reference column over here. With an APA reference column, you don't have to write that reference in every single one of these matrices. You just put the number down, and then you can go back to your reference list and get that one pristine copy of the reference that you need to put into your document. The second column here is keywords. The reason that I include that is because as you go through, you will identify keywords in all of the articles that you have, or you can. You don't have to, but you can. That can help you as you look at articles on a specific topic. So, for example, the keywords for one topic may be different from the keywords for another topic. Or you may have this particular article in 3 different matrices for 3 different topics, and only one keyword is relevant to each of those topics. So you can put that keyword down there with like articles, similar articles, or to articles on the same topic, so that you can track the keywords that are relevant. That way, as you go through, if you need to update periodically the articles that you have in your list, you can check on those keywords to see if anything new has happened. Also, you can check to see whether there are new keywords that you haven't considered that you should add. So it gives you a way to see if there's something that you need to look at that you haven't looked at yet. Again, I've got these other sections here, theoretical, conceptual framework. These are only a sample of some of the categories that you might have, okay? So as you've developed this matrix for each of these topics, you have an automatic sorting already begun on the articles that you need to compare and contrast with each other, consider the relative value of when you get ready to write up your work. So where do you start? Let's say that you have under voting record on NRA 55 articles. Oh my gosh, that's a lot to start sorting through. Where do you start to consider it? My suggestion is that you go to findings and conclusions and implications, those two categories or those two columns. Compare the findings, okay? And you might have results, you might have findings, you might have conclusions. However you put that down, consider those. Who has found the same thing? Who has found things that are completely different? That's the similarity and difference that you use in your creation of synthesis and integration. So start there. Who has found the same things? Then, looking back at these other categories, what was their population? What was their sample size? What were their data sources? What kind of methodology did they use? One used a case study and talked to teachers and administrators, another talked just to parents. See what you can do if there's similar findings to expand what's known. So let's say that you find that in one study they used observations and they talked to administrators and they talked to teachers and they found one result, the same result that they found in talking to parents alone with a different group of students. Then you can say parents in this group, for this group of students, and administrators and parents for this other group, or administrators and teachers for this other group, all agreed, blah, 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 blah. And you can expand what's known about this common finding based on what you've got in these other columns. At the same time, if you find a difference between two different findings, then you can talk about why one was a third grade class, teachers, another was a group of psychologists in fifth grade who had a different set of findings, and an explanation might be the difference in the roles, psychologist versus teacher, or the difference in the grades. So you have a way to compare and contrast these based on the findings as your pivot point. Okay. The other thing that's nice about using the literature review matrix like this and having one for each topic is that you can always copy and paste lines into different sections. So let's say you have agree, agree, disagree, 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 agree, 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 agree about the same kind of thing. You can paste all the agrees together. Just add some extra lines into your literature review matrix, copy the material that agrees, drop it up into one of those empty lines, and you have all of your agrees together, and then you can have all of your disagrees together. That can help you a little bit more, as well as you're starting to do your comparison and contrast to really see what you do and don't know from your literature. So depending on the number of articles you can have, those kinds of tricks can make a big difference for you. So that's the first part of the literature review analysis in preparation for the actual writing process, okay? Once you've done that, then you can go on to what I've created here as the topic review sheet. So each topic that you have a matrix for will have a review sheet. Notice that in the review sheet, you can put the numbers of the articles out here. You could always, if you want to, just put the references there if you like, whatever works for you. You put down the similarity, the common finding, the common conclusion in that column. Each of these other columns remind you of a different area that might give you something to expand on. So we find this common finding in these situations, and let's say that in one case, the population is different, it's third graders, fifth graders, and another place it might be the kind of study. One was a case study that looked at the program itself, another was phenomenology that talked to the teachers about the program. And so that might be worth sharing, that one focused on the teachers, one focused on how the program itself worked, to help us get different perspectives of how you can expand on that information that you've learned from the different articles. Each of these columns does not have to have an entry, but the fact that they're there gives you a reminder that those are things that you might want to consider as potentially expanding the information that you can share about any of those similarities that you've identified in the articles. So what you do is you take the information from your literature review matrix and you transfer it into here, and you add lines as you need to explain however many similarities you find. At the same time, you can do the same thing with integration. So let's say you have a difference in the results that you find between three different articles, okay? You list the difference here, right here, and then the reason for the difference can fall into any of these categories as well. They're not all going to be filled in, but they're here so that you can use them as you need to, and they remind you that there could be a difference there in one of these areas. If you can't identify what the reason might be, then you don't have anything in here. If you have multiple potential reasons, then you put in those multiple reasons. So you can say it could be this, or it could be this, or it could be this. That accounts for the difference. Okay, so, and again, you create as many difference categories as you need here, add as many lines as you need. So what you've done is essentially you have taken the information from your literature review matrix. As you've sorted and compiled the information, you've transferred it onto this sheet. This helps you then to not have to have an amorphous kind of piece of paper or file that you're putting it into, but to have a structured sheet into which to put the information. Again, you'll have a separate sheet for each topic. Now you come to the section outline, and I'm going to see if I can make this a little bit bigger for you. Okay, the section is going to cover multiple topics, okay? So in your section, you might have, it might be on the presidential example, it might be the type of political party affiliation, okay? So under this, you might have multiple syntheses, okay, and multiple integrations that you'll talk about. You'll transfer the information into those sections, talking about synthesis 1, synthesis 2, creating as many spaces as you need, adding to this form as you need to add as many syntheses as you need to and as many integrations. The details from the other columns of the table that explain the potential expansion or differences between the conclusions that you're drawing based on the literature that's available to you can go out into this section in a way that is simpler and more compact, easier to pull together to actually write up and present than it would be just to take it directly from that topic sheet. So what you're doing is you're creating an outline for each section based on a number of topics that are pulled together, okay? At the top here, you'll see topic separate sheet for each topic, relevant facts. So you're going to have some kind of section that's kind of an introduction, whether it's a paragraph or two, that just really explains the nature of this topic itself and why this topic is relevant and what you're going to talk about. And then you'll talk about your syntheses and your integrations. Then at the end, remember that you're also going to think in terms of why it's relevant, okay? Why this is relevant to your study. The relevance information would also be a separate paragraph, okay? So this gives you a place to put all of this information in about your sections. Okay. Then you go from there, and you do it, there we go, to the literature review itself. So let's say that you have multiple, and I'm going to go to the previous, multiple subtopics under each section. You might have subtopic sheets that come together for one section, and you could have summary here, then subtopic 1, subtopic 2, subtopic 3. When you get to your literature review, you're going to consider the parts that go into the literature review itself and put all of these pieces in order. So your introduction, there's a space for you to put notes about everything that might be relevant, and again, expand this as much as you need to with more lines, but to put the information that you need about your introduction, what needs to be included about your topic to make it understandable to the people who are about to read it, okay? Then you're going to talk about your article search method. What database did you use? What kind of sources did you use? Those things need to be there, the keywords that you used. So that's a part of your literature review. Then you go to your conceptual or theoretical framework and talk about it, okay? Again, pulling that together based on what you developed from your literature review itself. Then you go to topic 1 and you add additional topics as needed. So what you're doing is you're step by step building a larger picture without having to try to function using too many pieces of paper. You're just going step, 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 higher step, higher step, higher step, creating the overarching literature review that you want to produce. So you start down here with the literature review matrix. You do your basic analysis that you transfer onto this topic review sheet, which lets you do more organization and record what you got from the literature review matrix that you can then turn into a section outline with either one topic or multiple topics put together, so several sheets put together to create this section outline for you, placing your syntheses and integrations, putting a little bit of information that you can include at the top and at the bottom to create the context for this section and the topic, and then you create your literature review outline that includes all of the additional pieces that you need to have and your content material, the important pieces, placed here around your topics, okay? So the idea here is to create a document that will be complete, comprehensive, but without having it take a maximum amount of time. Instead, by superimposing a series of tools that can be useful to you on which you can superimpose your own needs. So take these documents and tweak them as you need. These particular documents are included in an article that is copyrighted. However, you are free to tweak them in any way you need to make them work for you. Play with them, see what works, and happy hunting. Please keep in touch. Let me know if I can help with anything. And let me know how it goes. Thank you very much for coming. Goodbye.